One of the first things I did as chief judge was order up signs to be put up in the walls in the rooms where we met as a bench. And the sign said, "For the good of the court," which is a big distinction between what's good for me, what's best for me in my chambers and how I do my work. Let's think about what's best for the entire court. I think you can always reach a consensus on important issues that you want to move forward with. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes marshaling the facts. It takes really walking around and talking to judges. I found that it's most helpful to go to their offices. I don't, as chief judge, I rarely would say, "I need you to come up to my office to see me today." But uh, going to someone's office is disarming in a way, but it's also a sign of respect, I think. And getting at where opposition might be, what's your concern? How can we address it? There's always a way to figure that out.
Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Schopp, co-founder of Social Driver. Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably the world. We are featuring leaders who figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and noisy world. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. Well, I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Judge John R. Tunheim, Senior Judge of the United States District Court for the District of Minnesota. Before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about today's guest. Number one, Judge Tunheim has a long and distinguished judicial career handling both criminal and civil trials, which includes serving as Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Minnesota from 2015 to 2022. Number two, beyond the ordinary responsibilities one may expect of someone in his position, Judge Tunheim also chaired the U.S. Assassination Records Review Board, overseeing the declassification of records related to President Kennedy's assassination. He also played a key role in developing the country of Kosovo's constitution and judicial system. Number three, Judge Tunheim is passionate about teaching at all levels. He's served as an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota Law School, teaching constitutional law. He also leads a course in leadership for new chief judges. And most recently, he conceived of the new Justice and Democracy Centers of Minnesota, a hands-on civic education experience for young people, which I'm really excited to talk about. Judge Tunheim, you've been called many things in your career: lawyer, judge, constitutional law professor, recipient of many honors, including the University of Minnesota Outstanding Achievement Award. And of course, you've been called chief judge. Well, today we're thrilled to call you chief influencer. Welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm happy to be with you today.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation, Judge Tunheim. To start, I know you're very passionate about civic education. When you meet with young people, I wonder if you could just tell us, how do you describe to them what a judge does? It's probably not just students who could use a crash course in the judicial branch.
Well, to many young people, judges are somewhat remote and probably scary. They've seen judges on TV. It's usually not a great impression that they have, or maybe their parents watch Judge Judy or something like that, which really skews their viewpoints about what a judge does. I think it's important that young people understand that judges are a very important part of our system, as are lawyers. The rule of law and civil society requires people to make difficult decisions that are based on the law and based on facts and every situation that presents itself. And we don't, as judges, decide things that we want to decide. We decide disputes that come before us, cases that come before us, and we do it on the basis of what the law is, the law that is determined by the Congress, by state legislatures, by courts in other jurisdictions. And that's important to emphasize to students. We have a system that works well. It's a system that they should understand. It's been pretty clear to me in my reading and talking to people that we've neglected civics education in this country for a long time. STEM education is really important. I understand that, but to lose so much of civics education, which has been the case over the last 50 years, I think it is a bad result for our country. We need knowledgeable people who understand the system, understand how to use the system, who look forward to being jurors and deciding critical issues for the courts. And I think that's something that talking to students, I want them to understand about uh, the the three branches of our government, and each has a role.
You mentioned the three branches of government. I saw a headline not too long ago that a really kind of shocking number of Americans couldn't even name the three branches. I think many of them couldn't even name one branch of government. So that
Yeah,
underscores your imperative that we need to educate young people and everyone about our system of government.
yeah. When you look at the statistics done by reputable pollsters, the Pew Institute, Annenberg Center, the polls show that a lot of people don't understand much about how government works. Perhaps they don't care, but they should care because it's very important to them. And we need to teach young people about it so that they can be great citizens in this country in years to come. But your statistics are right. Up to as many as a third of Americans can't name the three branches of government. And that's sad. And an even higher percentage can't even name one of the rights protected by the First Amendment.
Wow. So obviously we have some work to do. And you mentioned, young people. You and I had the opportunity to meet because of Social Driver's work with the Justice and Democracy
Mhm.
Centers of Minnesota and the launch event. I know you don't like the term founder, but it's really safe to say this project would not have launched without you. So I wonder if you could take me back to where this idea came from and where it is today.
Yeah, when I was chief judge, we continued all the wonderful outreach programs that our judges have been doing for years together with our partners in the legal community. We go to schools, we have various programs that we operate, a wonderful court camp in the summer where we bring high school students in to learn about the judiciary. But I always had this viewpoint that we never had a place to welcome students, to teach students in our courthouses. And when I saw what had been done by the Second Circuit in the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse in Manhattan, I thought we need to do something like this. Our centers are different from the centers at the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. But the idea is the same, to teach young people, to have a place for people to come, older people as well. Adults can benefit from walking through our centers. But I wanted a place where people could come and could learn about important constitutional cases, to learn about the jury system, to learn about voting and how important that is, in a way that would inspire them. I want to inspire young people to be lawyers, to be judges, to look forward to serving on a jury, to working in other jobs in the court, but basically, primarily to understand how important the judicial branch is, and how important all of our branches of government are, and how they do their work. So we we can get the funding to build the shells of these centers, but we don't have funding that is given to us by the appropriations we have for the exhibits and for the interactive exhibits that we wanted to put in the centers. So there's where the lawyer community, and to a lesser extent, the corporate community in the Twin Cities has stepped in. We have a great partnership with the Federal Bar Association, the local chapter in Minnesota, which is a terrific chapter, and they worked to raise some money so that we would have, together with them, a center or two centers eventually that we can be proud of and can really serve to help young people understand the judiciary and the legal system.
I love that. And, I want to talk a little bit about influence through the lens of the center. First, maybe I'll just say one of the things that really I loved going through it myself, that I didn't expect to see because I knew sort of what some of the exhibits might be, was the photos of you and your other judges on the wall, but they were in a, I don't know, sort of holographic type way where if you looked at it from one side, you would see your official judge portrait, but then from the other side, it would transform to you as like kids in school. You took, or, like a yearbook picture. And to me, that was such a cool touch because it said to a kid, look, you could see yourself. This chief judge was, a third grader just like you. And anyway, I just thought I'd share that, but I'd just love to hear your thoughts on how this center can influence young people so that they start to see themselves in the government, in the judicial system.
I think the photographs are a terrific idea, and it's very popular with young people. They happen to choose for my older photograph, the other half of the photograph, so to speak, one of the dorkiest pictures I've ever taken. But you look at all of our judges on that wall as young people from that particular angle, and you see the kids that come into the center. They look like the kids who come into the center. They're young. They're they don't look much different than what the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth graders that come in to see our center. And I think that's a good message. You too can be a leader in the legal system if that's what you want to be. So it's part of inspiring young people, I think. The center has a lot of spots. It's not a large space, but through the work of our designers, it holds a lot. And the constitutional cases with our judges explaining the particular constitutional right involved, I think is a really good stop. For example, student rights, the Tinker versus Des Moines case, which was really the first time the Supreme Court said students have free speech rights as well, and schools can't trample on that. That's particularly interesting, I think, for students to see that. But I like the interactive aspect of it. I think with young people today, you have to have interactive exhibits to really entertain them and help them learn. That's the way things are today. And I think the center has done a good job there. And of course, we have to have the bench where they can sit behind and put on a judicial robe and hold a gavel and take a picture. And that's been a fun spot for everybody in the center.
Everyone wants a selfie, right? So that's
right.
Built a selfie moment in. Who are some of the other types of people who walk through this exhibit while they're at the courthouse?
Many of our jurors or potential jurors who are called for jury duty have time, and they like to walk through as well, and they see the lessons that they can learn from all of the exhibits in there. But it's especially inspiring when we have new citizens who come in and we swear them in as part of the naturalization process, and they have time to walk through the center with their families or their supporters, and that's been inspiring as well. I spent a good part of a Sunday a few months ago with a large group of Girl Scouts who were earning a badge, and it just had a great time with them. And the lessons that they learned, the questions that they asked after seeing the exhibits, the tour of the courthouse. We combined a visit to the center with watching a part of a hearing going on in a courtroom. So you can be in the courtroom, feel what it is like, see the lawyers making arguments, the judge asking questions, making decisions. And for most of the students, they have a chance to spend 10 or 15 minutes with a judge, asking questions and just humanizing the judge, which I think is an important step for young people to know. Judges are just like anybody else. They're people that live down the street from them, and they're making difficult decisions, but they're making decisions based on our rules and our laws.
So when you describe the impact of the center, I mean, it's well, we're talking about the one in St. Paul at this point, but you have another that's going to be opening soon. But when we talk about that, it really connects. And I'm sure people who listen go, wow, yeah, this is great. But before it was a reality, was it difficult to get buy-in from your colleagues or the community that you should do this? Because, it was really a novel concept. Like you said, something similar in a circuit court, but different, and you're a district court. And so really it was an innovation.
It was. And, I think that using the facts was very important because the facts are that civics education has fallen by the wayside in our country. Many states are now realizing that and trying to up the game on social studies in high school. But the classes that I took many years ago in school, the classes that inspired me to be a lawyer, are not classes that are routinely offered today. And I think using the facts, using the information from polling that's been done is a good way to convince people that this is something you need to do, something we need to do. The judiciary needs support. We don't have appropriation power. We don't have an army. We just have the strength of our decisions and the respect that the public has for a judge and for the legal system. So let's build up that respect little by little with students coming to our courthouses and hopefully adults as well. And I think that was a good message. It resonated with our judges and the lawyers especially, because we needed to have some extra funding help because we just don't have that kind of funding to do this. I'm hopeful that that will change in the future, but we're really this has inspired other districts and circuits to go to work on centers as well. So I'm hopeful that most of our districts eventually will have a place for students to come in.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that others are emulating this. I think that's fantastic. So we've been talking so far about the importance of educating young people, but in terms of the education that you do, you teach constitutional law. You even teach leadership to new chief judges across the United States. And I wonder if you could share with us some of the leadership lessons that you've learned as a judge and a chief judge that you impart to others who are becoming chief judges.
The chief judges in the federal system have a lot of responsibility, but if you ask any one of them, they feel like they have very little power. We have independent judges. They do their work in their cases. We work together as a group as often as we can, but at the same time, they were very independent. That's the way judges should be. No one should tell them what to do. They should make up their own minds on decisions that they have to make. But the soft skills of being an effective chief judge are really interesting because you really need to motivate and inspire and work closely with judges who, for all practical purposes, have no incentive really to work with you. You don't control their pay. You don't control any promotion. You don't really control anything other than oversight of your local court system. So we try to teach judges that the soft skills of leadership are very important. Try to work to achieve a consensus, how to do that, how to really what's called modeling the way. You have to be a judge that does things. If you want other judges to do what you want them to do, you have to do it as well. You have to be the same. You're not better than any one of them. You're not on top of any of them. You are just a judge along with the rest of them. You have to work together in that respect. I think it's important for our chief judges to inspire a shared vision. That's what we did with the Justice and Democracy Centers. Everyone got on board with this vision of having a place for young people to come in to learn about the system. And the other thing is, oftentimes chief judges really need to challenge the process. We are a system that I heard it so many times. I've been in the court. I'm in my 30th year now. Well, that's the way we've always done it. So that's a reason not to change. It's worked well for us. Why do we want to change? Well, sometimes processes are no longer effective. And challenging the process making changes that are difficult is sometimes a responsibility of a chief judge. And that includes involving other judges in addressing the issue. I mean, you really need to involve everybody. I made sure that we expanded our committees with judges in charge of each committee, so every judge had a leadership role and a stake in the outcome. And that's really important as well. And finally, making sure that you thank all the people who work at the court, that you spend time meeting them, understanding them. We have a lot of people who work in our clerk's offices, in our probation office, uh, others that serve the court. Make sure that they're thanked. And, I have this idea that it's better to, instead of sending someone an email, which you can do something really quickly to thank someone for something in an email, write them a note card. If you write a note card and it's on good stock paper, it's going to be saved at least for a while. You might see it on a bulletin board. You might see it sitting on someone's desk. You're not going to see an email up on a bulletin board. You're not going to see an email on a desk, but a note card makes a difference. And I tried to discipline myself to frequently write notes to staff, to other judges, to people who had helped us in a way that would be something a little special. The art of writing notes, handwritten notes, has kind of disappeared in our electronic world. And that's okay because we don't have time to sit down and do that. But taking the time to write a note to someone to say thanks or you did a great job, really appreciate having you here, makes a big difference.
Absolutely. There's lots of great advice there for your fellow chief judges and that leadership course. Many of us wish we could be a fly on the wall, I'm sure, of that type of education. And so thank you for sharing some of the tips that you share with them. One of the things you mentioned was consensus. And during your tenure as chief judge, it looks like your court never had a divided vote, which is quite an achievement. But in today's partisan and political environment, it can really seem impossible to find common ground, much less consensus. So what advice do you have for people, for leaders navigating deeply held disagreements within their communities, their organizations? I think it's a challenge right now.
One of the first things I did as chief judge was order up signs to be put up in the walls in the rooms where we met as a bench. And the sign said, "For the good of the court," which is a big distinction between what's good for me, what's best for me in my chambers and how I do my work. Let's think about what's best for the entire court. I think you can always reach a consensus on important issues that you want to move forward with. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes marshaling the facts. It takes really walking around and talking to judges. I found that it's most helpful to go to their offices. As chief judge, I rarely would say, "I need you to come up to my office to see me today." But going to someone's office is disarming in a way, but it's also a sign of respect, I think. And getting at where opposition might be, what's your concern, how can we address it? There's always a way to figure that out. And it got so the eventually, toward the end of my tenure as chief judge, I'd had two judges working on a difficult issue, and they came back to the bench meeting and said, "We simply can't agree. We can't agree on how to proceed. These are our differences." And I just kind of looked at the two of them, and within about 30 seconds, "You want us to go back and reach an agreement, right?" I said, "Yes," and they did, and it was a good outcome. But we'd been so used to doing that, to coming back with an idea that everyone could support. Half of our judges were appointed by Republican presidents and half by Democratic presidents. So we come from very different backgrounds, private practice, public law offices, prosecutors, judges in state courts, very different backgrounds. But at the same time, I think you can have a common goal of doing something, making a change in a policy that is good for the court, and maybe not your preference, but you can understand why it's good for the court.
I love that. Those are just really great examples that not only a judge could learn from, but I mean, leaders of all kinds going to
Y-
their office or their chambers, I guess it is, and just
y-
that, you really
and-
believe anybody can find some common ground for consensus. I think that
well,
that's
you can, and I observed over the years that oftentimes we'd have a fight in a meeting and there'd be a divided vote, be 6-5 or whatever. And the people who lost the vote would leave the meeting mad and not willing to cooperate on something else. It's just better to keep working something until you can get a consensus. And if someone just simply doesn't agree, then you need to persuade them that this is better for the court. And it it works. It works. I did the same when I chaired a major judicial conference committee. We never had a divided vote there as well because we worked to get everyone on board. And it can be done.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. I'm a proud GW graduate myself, and I can attest that the faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
Well, I want to ask you, we've been talking about your role as a judge. Judges are sought after for their ability to resolve difficult matters. And I was really interested to learn that you were called upon to chair the U.S. Assassination Records Review Board, overseeing the declassification of records related to President Kennedy's assassination, something that's in the news again right now. Your
Back
efforts
in the
led,
news.
yeah, it's back in the news, and you've been quoted in the news recently. Your efforts led to the release of over 5 million pages of materials to the public, earning you the James Madison Award in 1999. Congratulations. And I just wanted to ask, how do you apply your judicial skills to such a major undertaking, which isn't it's not a legal case?
Well, looking back, it's almost a blur now because we had so much to do in such a short period of time. Um, we were confirmed to establish and run a temporary agency to do this declassification, and so there was a lot of work to do right away to hire a staff to get everything in place, and it is a blur now when I look back at it. But in terms of, we had a law that we had to apply. And I think that we, as a board, because there was a 5-member board, which I chaired, got on the same page right away as to what we wanted to do, how we wanted to approach the work. We wanted to make sure that we did so faithfully to what the law said and what President Clinton wanted to have done with this board. And so that required us to stand up to agencies that didn't want documents released, didn't want information released, particularly the CIA and FBI have the most documents. And so I think getting on the same page right away, having those discussions, making sure that all of us were firm in our ability to apply the law well and apply it independently, and hiring a staff that believed in the mission of the board. We did our work in about 4 years' time, a little bit less than that. We wrapped up in 1998. And while it would have been nice to have another year because there's always more that you can do, and we started losing staff toward the end, which was understandable because they didn't want to be left without a job when the board had finished its work. But at the same time, it's a lot of the same leadership skills of making sure everyone is on the same page, that we approach our work in the same way, that we inspire our staff to be very professional and very interested in how we can get the outcomes that we wanted. And we released virtually everything. I mean, we did protect some information which should have been released in 2017, but that's the vagaries of the current political system in Washington.
Were there any divided, I guess, votes? I don't know how you were structured in terms of that board, or any really difficult decisions that kind of came to you as the the chair that you had to help navigate?
Yeah, getting into working with the agencies and making sure that they trusted us was really a job that I took on and spent a lot of time doing, just making sure that they understood that we weren't some wild-eyed conspiracy theorists who were about to, tear down an agency, that we were there to do a job, and that was important. I don't think we had any divided votes. We had spirited discussions. Sometimes we didn't agree with what staff had presented to us as a board, but by and large, we did operate by consensus and made some tough decisions because there was a lot of pressure to protect certain information that would have an impact on an agency. In particular, we made the decision early on that if the information was directly related to the assassination, then we were going to release it, no matter what the consequences of that might be. We protected information such as names of informants and methods of gathering intelligence and those kinds of things that were something that were still part of the nation's secrets. But in terms of anything directly related to the assassination, we released it because that was important to us, because one of our goals, which we set forth at the beginning, was to release as much information as we could so that people could decide for themselves what they thought happened that day in Dallas.
I just what an incredible project to chair. It's just and I think again you brought that theme of consensus as possible, and you were able to do that. If that weren't enough of an exciting project for you to work on, I think I was just so fascinated to learn that you helped write the Constitution of Kosovo. You've been involved in many different projects related to international law, but I wonder if you could talk about that one in particular. How did you manage to find common ground and build the foundation for a new country, obviously under probably a tight timeline? And by the way, multiple languages were required for the drafting of that Constitution. So was that your toughest challenge when it comes to consensus?
It probably was. It was an enormous challenge. I was a foreigner, although I had built up a considerable amount of respect in Kosovo since I'd been there from the beginning, off and on, helping with developing the legal system, which was completely destroyed by the war. Courthouses, files, everything was destroyed, and many of the ethnic Albanians who had legal backgrounds had not really functioned in the system for many years because of the discrimination that had occurred. But choosing a group of people who could be wise enough and understanding enough to be a constitutional committee, and then guiding them through the process. A good part, not I'd say maybe 30 to 35% of a modern constitution is effectively already written, because there's so many world covenants that countries abide by or are supposed to abide by because they've said that they would, that need to be part of a constitution, rights that are inherent and should be granted to people. The rest of it is largely deciding how you want your government to be organized. And there they had decisions to make and additional rights that they wanted to provide. So guiding them through that process, and in particular, the writing part of it was really important, because not only did we have to get the right word in English, which is one of their 6 languages, we needed to have the right word in Albanian and in Serbian, and then the other languages that are commonly used in parts of the country. So just the exercise of writing words that mean the same thing in different languages is a real challenge. And it was fascinating to do that and to think of the right word that would fit. And I think that the ultimate, and we had to do it also in a sort of a semi-secret situation, because Serbia was still claiming that Kosovo was part of their country, and they were objecting to the writing of a constitution, even though we had ethnic Serbs as part of the committee, although they often would meet separately. So that was an additional problem. I had to go back and forth between 2 groups. But we had a goal and a timeline that we had to get done. They were motivated to get it done, so that helped a lot. There was no one who was trying to slow up this process, and therefore it was a lot of work over a short period of time. But resolving the big questions was one of those issues where I had to go back and forth between leaders of the various political parties to say, okay, how are we going to resolve this issue? What's the president, what's the prime minister going to do? Those kinds of issues, which was fascinating as an exercise in determining good governance. But at the same time, I think most everyone in Kosovo is proud of their constitution, and it has worked well since independence in 2008.
You or others get called on? I mean, I would imagine with the language can't be perfect, right? Because sometimes languages don't have the exact translation, and how does it work in terms of there's a constitutional question? Does one language have preference? Do they reach out to you for advice? I'm just kind of curious what this looks like today.
Well, I have been reached out for advice by members of the Constitutional Court who I've worked with over the years to help them with their rules and everything. And they've been really a bright light, I think, in Kosovo, a very independent, strong court. But it's interesting because, okay, well, let's look at what the Albanian word is, and let's look at what the English word is, and maybe we'll also look at the Serbian word for that. And you could see this exercise ongoing on the part of the members of the court, the judges, saying, well, it isn't exactly what that means in Albanian. Oh, well, maybe we didn't get that exactly right. But sometimes there are just no words that mean the same thing in two different languages. So, but I have spent a lot of time with the court over the years. I think they've done a marvelous job. They've been very strong judges and have done a great job for the people of Kosovo.
What an amazing thing to be part of, really part of history of a new country, I guess, or I don't know if you call it a new country, but a country that's, developing its system of government in that way. I want to, coming back to our country, during your tenure as chief judge, I know you had to steer the court through a global pandemic, as well as widespread civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. I wonder if you could share what you've learned about leadership during especially challenging times.
Yeah, that was a really difficult time. The pandemic hit us with a blunt force, everything shut down, and we had to make sure that we could continue our operations and continue to provide the role of a justice system in the federal courts. I think the key there was making sure that all of our judges were involved, keeping them informed of every development. We had frequent Zoom calls where everybody joined in. I don't know where they were. They might be at home. They might be someplace else. I sometimes felt like I was the only person in the entire courthouse, although I think there were a couple of security guards downstairs, but that's about it. But just keeping judges informed, including them in the decision-making process. Our clerk did a terrific job as well, helping them. We redid all of our processes so that we could do everything remotely for a period of time, and to decide when we could go back to a trial and have sufficient protections in courtrooms, because jurors don't want to come in and catch a serious illness. There's no question about that. We had to be really careful. We bought a lot of plexiglass. I'm not sure where it is today, but there's probably a large room filled with a lot of plexiglass that we used in our courtrooms to protect people. But I think in the end, we made it through with no real backlog on criminal cases. And civil cases, we were able to eliminate the backlog quite quickly. And that's because we had good processes for continuing during the pandemic. I actually did a virtual civil jury trial where all the jurors were at home watching over Zoom and participating in that way. And it actually worked really well. I was surprised at how well it worked. The jurors were ecstatic. They could be a federal court juror from their kitchen or office in their house on a cold time in January, so they didn't have to drive to Minneapolis. No one wanted to drive to Minneapolis during that era, largely because of George Floyd and that aftermath. So being able to be a juror at home worked really well. But I think the most important principle was keeping all the judges advised about what was going on. And in terms of staff, um, we started a weekly newsletter that I sent out every Friday that summarized everything that had been done that week, what was going on, highlighted things that people had done really well, that had been really helpful to the court, but just keeping everyone connected during a time when literally everybody was working from home. And I think that was really important as well. It was a lot of extra work as a chief judge during that period of time, but I think it was worthwhile to spend that extra time. And the George Floyd matter was certainly something that was pretty devastating for Minnesota, for Minneapolis. I remember the night standing on the top floor of a courthouse. You could see the fires down along Lake Street. Wasn't that far away, and the marshals protecting our building. There were a lot of issues there that required the chief judge to just be there and keep track of what's going on and help.
When some of the things you had to do to adapt during the pandemic, have some of those things stuck? Did you apply those to adapt? So obviously you're able to get rid of the plexiglass, but I just wonder if there's anything from a communication or influence standpoint that may have stuck with the court till today.
We learned how to do Zoom, and that was really important for us, believe it or not. I mean, we didn't have any kind of video conferencing that we did before at all. We would have video conferencing to bring a distant witness in for a court proceeding, but that was rarely used.
Yeah.
But now, although we've largely gone back to most everything being in person, we no longer have the authority under the federal court rules to do Zoom sentencings or Zoom changes of pleas, which was very helpful to have during the pandemic. We can't do that anymore. We can do initial appearances by Zoom in criminal cases. But there are a lot of, for example, I have these very large nationwide cases that are assigned to me. They're antitrust cases. I do monthly status conferences. I do them over Zoom. The lawyers are everywhere in the country. They just turn around in their desk and turn on the Zoom, and we can have a status conference, and we can even argue some minor motions. Bigger motions, I have people come into the courthouse, but I also have remote access available to others who want to watch. So it's been really good for that. If a lawyer is in Los Angeles or something and says, could we have this hearing by Zoom so I don't have to travel to Minnesota, especially if it's January, then I usually always will give approval for that. And so I'm in the courtroom. I have the big screen in front of me, and my staff is there with me, and then the lawyers are remote, and it works really well. I don't know that we would have ever gone to that process had it not been for the pandemic. So we learned things there, and we learned things about making our buildings healthier, which is important. The fresh air intakes and those kinds of things that weren't particularly working very well in older times. We learned how to be more careful with how we treat our buildings as well.
We're grateful that you adopted Zoom because for those who are watching instead of listening, we're Zooming today. So that was convenient for us.
It works amazingly well. And believe it or not, when we started in that April of 2020, when we started, we got to go back to hearings and how can we do it? We were told we couldn't use Zoom because it was not safe, because information might be filtered to China or some other place. Well, we went ahead anyway, and we engaged in contracts with Zoom, which is simply the United States version. Nothing leaves the United States, and eventually the judicial system came around to saying, okay, it's good to do that. Well, it would have been nice earlier. You could have given us money for it.
Yeah, you were a first mover on that one, it sounds like.
Yeah.
On the courts. Well, to close today, Judge Tunheim, I want to bring it back to the Justice and Democracy Centers. I had the opportunity to be with you when you launched the St. Paul Center several months ago, and Justice Sonia Sotomayor spoke at the event. I just want to ask what it meant for you to have a member of the U.S. Supreme Court stand alongside you to celebrate the opening of the center, which was really your brainchild.
Well, Justice Sotomayor's presence with us that night meant the world to me. She's a remarkable person. She's an incredible judge and even better person. And she's very committed to teaching young people about civics, about our system. She's written some children's books, which are really, really good. And just watching her spend time with the middle school students essentially that we brought in that day was just remarkable. Asking her questions, she's answering, she's engaging with them, she's telling them about cases that are described in the center. It was so great to have her there, and it did mean a lot to us. The attendance in the center has been huge this year so far. We've gotten some law firms to help with funding bus trips. So there's that. We've gotten rid of that barrier for schools that don't have money for a field trip. So the numbers are going up fast. And I think part of that is because Justice Sotomayor cared enough to come out and spend an evening with us and tour the center and talk to people, talk to a large group of people who were there about the value of civics education and how we really need to do this as a legal system.
She was extremely gracious and inspiring, and you were extremely gracious to include me and Social Driver in that event.
Well, we've appreciated your help very much because it's what we've done to develop social studies information and materials and curriculum for teachers, I think has helped bring students to the center as well. So our online presence is really important.
Well, thank you. It's been a real privilege to work with you and your team on it. And as we wrap up, I just want to say, this has been a very inspiring interview for me. We live in times that, are divided. And I think a lot of people think there's just no way to find common ground, much less consensus. But I think what you shared today is really important because you described how having, a bench of judges who are appointed by different political parties and have different backgrounds, that you can find consensus. And for your tenure as chief judge, you were able to do that time and again. Even when folks said it wasn't possible, you sent them back and they stepped up and you were able to find consensus. But outside of the courtroom, you shared some incredible stories about how you were able to find consensus, build consensus in situations that might seem impossible. Something like declassifying classified records about the assassination of a president, and helping to form the new government and write the Constitution for a country, and having to do that in 6 languages. So I think if you can lead the way and show people how to build consensus in all of those really challenging situations, I'm hopeful that there is no situation that leaders can't come together and find some way forward. And I think that the folks who have listened to this episode are going to be inspired to go back and take some of those lessons that you shared, managing by walking around, going to people where they are, listening, and more. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us on Chief Influencer.
Well, thank you. Finding common ground is really important. It takes hard work, and it sometimes takes a little sacrifice as well. But I think common ground can be found everywhere. So thank you, Anthony.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.